Welcome to the Live Better, Sell Better podcast with your host, Kevin Dorsey of Inside Sales Excellence, the #1 Patreon group and YouTube channel for tech sellers and tech sales leaders, where we dive in deep for tactical advice on how to book more meetings, close more deals faster, and lead sales teams to success. But we don't stop there. We also focus on the person in salesperson. We talk about mindset, goals, time management, and so much more. So thank you for listening. And if you're interested, head on over to patreon.com/inside sales excellence. Now with that, grab a notepad, get ready, and let's dive into the good stuff.
What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Live Better, Sell Better podcast. This is your host, Kevin Dorsey, aka KD. And today we are talking about the future of work now. Because I believe that the future of work is already here. And yet so many of us as leaders and as companies are trying to adapt, to transform, to figure out how do we do this the right way? How do you give your team autonomy while at the same time giving structure? How do you give people flexibility and freedom while at the same time getting results? How do you give people this remote working space but still hold people accountable? It is a really hard problem to solve, which is why I'm so excited to have Beth Jacobs on the show with me today. She's the Chief Growth Officer over at vChief, and this is where she is focused. This is what she's passionate about on how can we do work right now and looking into the future. So I'm pumped for this topic today. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Super excited to be here, Katie.
This is going to be a good one. So I got to ask the first question of why this topic, right? When I asked you what you want to talk about, what you're focused on, this was what came up. You said the future of work and autonomy, flexibility, accountability. Why is this so top of mind for you right now?
I think it's been top of mind for me most of my career. I think most folks have found that work doesn't work for them. It's something that is obviously required in order to pay the bills and do all of the things you want to do in life. But it doesn't work for most people the way it has been traditionally set up. And so much of how we work today has been set up, 100 plus years ago in a different time, a different era, and a different place. So what I found over my career is where I thrive is not in a traditional work setting. And I think that's true for a lot of folks out there. So that's why it's top of mind for me. And I think that developing a new way to work and can only bring our businesses forward at a much faster clip.
And I want to touch on this word you said, which is thrive, right? So I didn't thrive in the normal work setting, because we'll unpack how work came to be here in a second. Mm-hmm. But how did you, I ask this question, how did you figure out how you thrived or that it wasn't working for you, right? Because everyone's different. Everyone has different styles and needs, but what did you pick up on where you were finally no, this isn't working for me? There has to be a better way.
Yeah, I would say, and I will, full disclosure, I've been working from home since 2009. So it's been a long road. I think there were many things over the years and in different roles and positions. And when I say I wasn't thriving, don't get me wrong, I was still performing. Mm-hmm. I was always, at the top of the list. And that's what has provided me with flexibility and with more autonomy when other folks weren't given that same level. So that's why I've been working from home from 2009. And I think that there were a lot of indicators around when I worked in an office, the social scene that a lot of folks have. I was working so many hours, probably 70, 80 hours a week, because what I realized is during the day, there's so much politicking going on in the office that I'm going to go in and I'm going to politic all day. And then I have to get my work done. And then that's happening at night. And I can't imagine, I know for some folks, they enjoy the like office dynamic, and I do to an extent, and I miss those parts of it to an extent, but not all day, every day. Like I come to work because I want to accomplish things and I enjoy what I do. But I do not want to do it 80 hours a week anymore.
And I like that you distinguish the difference between performing and thriving. Because I think that's actually a really good call out, because there are a lot of high performers that are not thriving, right? Living their best lives, having the energy, the relationships that they want or they need, but they're performing. So they're like, well, this must be the way.
Great.
And so break down the history of work for me real quick, because I love that you called this out of like, how we're working now. I mean, obviously, I don't remember the last time I was working 9 to 5. I don't think I've ever worked 9 to 5, but conceptually 9 to 5, right? Like in an office, all those things. Talk about kind of that evolution of work. So I think the backstory here would help people have a better understanding of like where even like the 8-hour day work came from and all of that. So break that down for everyone, because I think the history here is very interesting. Yeah.
And I think, and I am no expert in like labor relations and the history of work, but my understanding is that a lot of that came out from the Ford production lines, and where the 8-hour workday came from, 5 days a week. All of that narrative came from that place, and at that time, that was a concession.
Right.
That was a smaller amount of time that folks were working before, and that Ford felt that folks needed to be able to thrive. And so that was progress at that time. And now it's been 100 years. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't really changed. And I would say in professional settings, in a lot of work settings, folks are not even working 8-hour days. They are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And my question there is, are folks actually accomplishing more in that time or less? And my belief is that 7% they are accomplishing less. There have been many studies done that says that most folks have about 5 to 7 hours of true productivity in their day. Not work time. Like you can do a lot during work time, right? The chitty chat, the like all of the other things, sit in on this webinar, listen to it, consider it part of your work day. And do a lot of other things that are or are not productive. And so, there's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of new information uncovered, and yet folks are really married to the 9 to 5. And in professional office environments, especially with new technology, where folks can be available 24/7, and that it has gone to a whole new level of burnout and honestly a lack of engagement.
It's crazy, right? Like how it is. I think very similar studies. I think some of the more recent ones are like 2 to 3 hours of productive work per day
at a time, and like in chunks,
right? In chunks, not flow state. Like I got 15 minutes here. I got maybe a 20-minute burst over here. 2 to 3 hours of productive work per day is what they are seeing in the knowledge worker space, which is just insane, right? But then people are still working 9, 10, 11-hour days. And it's like, what are we working on? Right? Like, where is that time going? And what always cracks me up about Ford, right? Because like Ford was the one that like, he made the concession. He shortened the hours. But a lot of people forget why he did it. Okay. Ford was a capitalist. What he realized, if people were working 12 hours, they couldn't spend money. If they were working from 7 to 7, they didn't need a car. Right. They weren't buying things because they were always at work. So he conceded so people could spend, so they'd have to work so he could keep them in the cycle. Like the dude knew what he was doing in all this. And yet here we are 100 years later, 9 to 5. And for a lot of people, it's 8 to 5 to 7 to dinner time to 9 to a little bit of email cleanup, wake up and do it all over again. And so,
I read an interview with a woman recently who said, who lives off the grid, and they were like, well, how long does it take you to build a fire and to like make your meals and all of this? And she's like, it takes a long time. And she's like, but it's amazing to me what people will do to avoid building a fire. Like you're doing all of these things to avoid the fire, like doing what I'm doing, but I don't have to do what you do. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going off the grid.
Okay, yeah. I think we all have visions of that now. Like I'm looking at buying some land. Like, it'd be nice just to really, really unplug. So let's go down this path here of like how much of that is self-inflicted, kind of what you were just talking about, versus the environment work is creating. Because I think there's two sides of this, right? Like I love that analogy. Like people will avoid making the fire. No one's making them avoid making the fire. So talk about first, like the self-inflicted, like what are things that as an individual I can and should be doing to thrive in work? And then we can talk about what companies and leaders can be doing to help people thrive in work.
Yes. So part of my, my work history is that I definitely some self-inflicted work there. I mean, absolutely. I started working when I was 15. I was like, I want to go to college. There's no way my parents are going to pay for it. So I need to work and I need to be good at it. And I need to make as much money as I can so that I can go to college and not have much debt and do all of those things. And so at a very young age, that is what worked for me. I worked at an amusement park and I worked my way up the little corporate rides department ladder. Nice. And, worked 50 hours a week while going to school full time, 80 hours a week in the summer. And when I graduated from college, I was like, 40 hours a week? This feels like nothing. So what did I do? I worked more. And the problem is that you get into a cycle where that is rewarded, right? Like you're going to work. I can have you instead of hiring two people. So that it worked for me for a while, right? It helped me get where I am today. I was rewarded for it. And so it has taken me many years to break some of those habits. And it's still something that I have to consciously do every day. And so some of that is very self-inflicted. And then the other half of that is that it is rewarded. People love it when you are willing to give it your all, right? But should you be giving your all to work? Or should there be something left for the rest of your life? And so there are people and organizations who are willing to take your all. And I think so you get rewarded for it. So I do think that there's two sides of it at every piece. I think with the culture that like we are, building at vChief, and part of what I found in my years of consulting is that people might be willing to give their all for a while. And that might work for you for a little while, might work for both sides. It will not work for long. It will not work for the long term. There is a sustainability factor that every individual needs for their lives, and then every business needs in order to move them forward.
This might be a loaded question here, but I'm going to ask it because I struggle with this internally as well. Do you think if you went back and did it differently, do you think you'd be in the situation you are now? This is what I struggle with sometimes. Is like, it's almost like we have to go through it to get to this enlightened place of like, you know what? Maybe that wasn't all worth it. But at the same time, would I be in this situation?
Right.
If I hadn't? So like, what are your thoughts there? Because I struggle with this topic internally. Is like, I'm talking to people younger in their careers and letting them know like, hey, like, it's not all about this. But at the same time, it's like, can they get to this this place of freedom, this place of autonomy if they don't do that early. So talk a little bit about that. I'm really curious on your.
Yeah, that's a tough question because it brings up a lot of different things. And I think around like what opportunities people have at a young age and like what their network is at a young age and how all of those pieces fit together. So I'm going to put that piece aside for a minute and more focus on just the root of your question. I would say I don't know. I think that every piece of my work and life experience have gotten me to where I am today, whether it was a terrible work experience, whether it was like an amazing mentor or boss that I had along the way. Both of those things have brought me to this place. Now, looking back, do I look and see at all of those hours that I was working and I was performing? Could I have performed better, actually, if I had worked less? Like, I remember one moment where, it's probably 1:00 in the morning and I'm working on something to get to my boss and I like shoot her a message and she writes me back and is like, my advice to you in this moment is go to bed. And she's like, this answer will be clear to you in the morning. And she's like, it's not clear to me. It's 1 a.m. It's not going to be clear to you either. I wake up and I'm like, okay, I go to bed. I get up the next morning and I'm like, oh yeah. And I like finish the thing in like 15 minutes. So like, was I, it's the whole, like, what do people value? And so like my boss at that moment did not value the fact that I was working at 1 a.m., but so many cultures do. And so if people can think about what they are valuing in the fact that you are working so hard, and what that actually means in terms of what you are producing and how you are performing. So looking back, I'm not sure, honestly, and it was, times have changed a lot. I'm not sure if I would be here at that moment if I hadn't put in all of that time. But I can say that I do think that I would have performed even better had I felt that I was able to work less.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the key on all this is like there's working more and there's getting the right things done. There's working more and having quality of work. I've had very similar conversations like with my managers, right? Like I get a ding on the weekend that they're updating the one-on-one doc, or I get an email late at night and I'm like, you better stop right now. Like, I don't know why you're working on this on a Sunday afternoon, because to me, that's actually a sign of something else. Either we're not focused during the week the way that we need to be, or something else is happening here, because I don't want you working on this on Sunday. That's not what it's there for, right? And I think it's important as leaders that like, I'll recognize hard work, but I'm not an effort hound. I'm an efficiency hound. Like, get it done. I don't want it. If it's taking you 10 hours, we need to talk about why.
Let's talk about that.
Like even with my team, same as like, I'm hearing, like you're putting in all these extra hours. Why? Like, it's not, it's something's wrong here right now. So let's shift this to the leadership side, right? Because I know a lot of leaders, are dealing with it and struggling with this. Like, okay, I hear you, Beth. Yeah, great, cool, utopian idea. How do I make sure that, people are getting the right things done while giving this sort of autonomy or freedom to do it? Like, let's talk about now how leadership can maybe set this tone a little bit better.
Yeah, it comes from the top, 100%. If your leader is getting pressure, they are going to put that pressure on you most of the time. Not all of the time, unless they are like a really fantastic leader. But yes, I remember, and that, back to kind of your question around internal versus external pressure. When I first got kids, we went different route, foster care. I got kids on a Friday afternoon, And I had just traveled for 2 weeks straight. And you know what my boss said? You can take a couple days off, but make sure you get this report done before 9 a.m. Monday morning. And so that is where it has to come. It has to come from the top. You cannot survive in your job thinking that you yourself can be the one who's going to make all of the change and live a healthy, sustainable life. So as leaders, it comes down to finding a fit for you in an organization that values the same things that you value, and then ensuring that that is the leadership that you are giving to your team. So, for example, I did do consulting for a few years, and honestly, most of it was because I was like, the work isn't working for me. I'm going to make it work for me. And then I started with vChief because this was the place where I felt that I could be myself, and that it was a place that upheld the same values that I have. And so whatever your values are, you need to explore that, figure out what they are, and find a place that values the same things. And it's okay if folks out there don't value the same things that I do. It's not a problem. Everyone should and can do what is important to them. But I think it's about finding that fit and finding a place that has the same outlook that you do.
And that's where I think actually a lot of founders and leaders sometimes mess up, is they push either their values down, or they feel like, all right, well, I'm not asking my people to work this way. This is just how I work. And they forget how that actually plays out, right? No, I don't want my people working on the weekend. No, I would never want that. But your whole team knows you work on the weekends.
Yes.
You're going to create that dynamic. You're going to create that culture, right? That was actually something that happened with my team when I moved. So I was in LA, moved to Austin, and, I start work at 6 a.m. Always have. That's what I do. And what started happening, right, is I was starting at 6. Most of my team was still a couple hours behind. So I'm sending Slacks and, emails out at 4 o'clock in the morning. And people started responding at 7 o'clock my time. And it actually took me like a couple of weeks to say, wait. It is 5 o'clock what on earth are you doing responding to this email right now? They're like, oh, well, you sent it out, so I wanted to make sure I got to it. I was like, oh, Jesus. Right. So I would leave a lot of things unsaid. I was just getting my work done, but I wouldn't send them there until I knew the team was up and going, because they'll mirror that. Even if you're not trying to set that up, it just happens because you're the leader and people look to it. So
I would say yes. And though, actually, to that.
Yes.
So we have definitely had that issue at vChief, but our entire idea is that you work when it works for you. And so if you get a Slack from the CEO at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, there's a good chance she's in Egypt and she's working when it works for her. And that doesn't mean that has to work for you. And so folks do work. They might work on the weekend. They might work they might be in a different time zone, in a different country. That's kind of what we do, is do it when it works for you, and be very clear with folks that is not when they need to work. And so, I used to be more of that, schedule send and do all of that. And now I'm more of everybody's working when it works for them, and that's okay. But you have to be clear with people and say, like, you should not be working just because it's a time that I am working or the CEO is working. Or
and that was the message that had to be conveyed, because I had conveyed it. That's why it caught me so off guard. We had always talked that way, but all of a sudden how I worked changed. And as their leader, I think that even without asking for it, they're like, oh, well, that's when our leader likes to work. So that means that's when I need to work. And it's like, no. That's just me working. You get into your day like the normal way. And I think that's just the key to all of it. Now, real quick, as we start to wrap here, I really want to talk about like these two A words, autonomy and accountability.
Yes.
Because these are hard, right? As leaders, in terms of like, how do we balance autonomy with accountability? I would love to kind of get your thoughts here.
So we do have a work when it works for you schedule. We have, technically we call it a 4-day work week, but what we have is, and I think that helps with the piece that we were just talking about, there's always going to be people working when you're not working, and you're going to be working when other people aren't working. It's not a big deal. It's not like a set day or anything like that. It's just work your, 32 hours, get your stuff done. We have meetings on pretty much, for the most part, just on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes on Mondays. Come to your meetings, get your shit done. Nobody cares. And at the same time, that means there has to be a high level of accountability as individuals and as leaders. So being very clear on what metrics that are expected for folks to hit, when they're expected to hit them, and clear communication if things are not going well. So everybody comes to vChief because they think they're going to love the culture. Let me tell you, that does not work for everyone. Mm-hmm. It works for some people. And for some people, it is amazing. They love it. They have everything that they wanted for a job. We have recruited people. Our team is made up of people who left the workforce because work wasn't working for them. We have amazing high performers, while everybody else was like, there's a talent crisis. We didn't have a crisis. We were recruiting amazing people. We have the best sales team I have ever managed in my life. And the reason for that is because this works for them. Now we've had other folks who come on and it did not work for them. They hadn't worked from home before. They had distractions that did not work for them. They wanted to leave their house, go somewhere, turn off life. They had other people in their lives who potentially who don't understand what work from home means and the flexibility means, and want you to do other things when you want to be working.
Yes.
And so there is a huge amount of self-awareness that's needed on how you work and how you don't work. And then there is a huge amount of personal accountability and the ability for a leader to also hold you accountable. It's like having kids, right? If they're doing their homework, am I talking to them about doing their homework? No. As soon as those grades slip, Mama's got something to say.
Thank you.
And it's the same thing in the workplace. Everything's going great. Great. Wonderful. Let's keep going. Let's talk about your growth and what you need and, how you want to grow your career and all of those things. And at the same time, I'm going to be looking at what's important. We haven't grown 500% with everyone working whenever they want and wherever they want, by not holding folks accountable to their jobs and their metrics. And so you do not get flexibility or autonomy without accountability.
I was just going to pull it back to something you said at the very beginning that I didn't want people to miss. I earned the autonomy and flexibility through performance. I was performing. In fact, I was a high performer. right? And this is something that I think gets lost in translation a lot of times, is like, if you are performing,
Yes.
autonomy and flexibility show up. And generally, truthfully,
They
a lot of
should.
they should, right? And if they don't, then your high performers will leave, because they're like, no, like, I'm performing and I'm still being managed this way. Deuces, I'm out. I'm not going to deal with that. But then what happens is you have the top performers, and then you have the rest looking and going, well, I want that.
Yes.
Why? Beth doesn't have to come in the office, so why do I? Because Beth is at 200% of her goal.
Mm-hmm.
You get to 200% of your goal, you can have it too. And so I do think there's been this pushback on understanding what our results are in our job. If you are hitting them, hit them. But if you're not, that's when you get held accountable, is if you're not producing what you're supposed to produce. That's when there's a little bit more tightness or structure to get on track with that. So like talk about that a little bit, just around like, maybe having some of those tough conversations. I know a lot of leaders, it's like, okay, we're remote now. I don't really know what Beth's doing out there. Like maybe she's doing her job. Maybe she's not. The results are okay. They're not good, but they're not bad. Like, talk about that a little bit, especially in this remote world.
Yes. So the first part is clarity, right? What are the metrics that we're trying to hit, and why are they important? So if a leader can't clarify what they expect from their team, whether it's a sales team or anything else, you're not going to get anything, because people aren't working on the things that they should be working on to move the organization forward. So first thing is like clarity of role and clarity of expectations. And now that's easy to say if you've been in a company who's been around for a long time. In a smaller business where things are constantly changing, as they are at vChief and a lot of other businesses, that's much harder to do. So it really is breaking it down for that individual and their role of what are the things that must be moved forward. And we cannot move everything forward at the same pace at the same time. So what are those top things that have to move in order to move the organization, the team forward? Get into those things, be clear about them, and then have those conversations. And, if there is one thing I learned managing rides at an amusement park, it was document. Document. So like, what is happening? What's going well? What isn't going well? And be really clear with folks. Look, this piece of your job is going really well. This is not. What's going on here? Do you need support? Do you not enjoy the job? Is this not what you expected? Is this environment working for you? Is it not working for you? Have you worked from home before? Have you not? What are the pieces that you need to be successful? And so those are a lot of the conversations that we have if things maybe are not going as well. And then, of course,
I love that, because it's
documentation.
So like, one of my favorite business books is not a business book. It's the Checklist Manifesto.
Oh, I haven't read that.
Oh, you will love it, because also you've lived it, especially in an amusement park, right? Like the whole concept.
Yeah, I was like, when you say checklist, it gives me a little trauma. Actually,
I know, like,
from the amusement park.
I discovered this, like, amusement park one, like there's a checklist, and what the whole concept of the book is actually written by a surgeon. It's not written by a business person. It's not written by leaders. It's written by a surgeon, and talking about how checklists, right, reduce death rates in hospitals. They reduce infection rates. They reduce, how long people stayed in bed, right? Like, all just from the simple checklist of like, hey, did you change their IV today? Mm-hmm. Like, what are those things that are necessary? Same idea. What do pilots do before every flight? They go through their pre-flight checklist, right? And the whole concept there is, to your point, the documentation of best practices. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't got to checklist everything. Like, okay, did I log in? Yes, I logged in. Did I check my email? No, it's not that. But it's like, did you check every individual's seatbelt on the ride?
Yes, exactly.
Did you ensure that the surge protector was flipped to whatever? Like, those are like the make or break things that, you know what, we should checklist it. And to your point, with my teams, we talk about the D3 method, which was define, document, demonstrate. Define what good looks like, document it, and then demonstrate it. Show, teach, coach what good looks like, because that's the only way to make it repeatable, especially in this remote world, because people aren't seeing it as much if they're not in the office, if they're not next to someone making that call or hearing something. Oh, you need to share this stuff more remotely, which I think is key. And so, all right. So as we start to wrap here, I knew there's no way we're going to keep this to 30 minutes because it's too good of a topic, right? A lot of this already blends into the theme of, you know, why I started this show is this concept of live better, sell better, right? This idea of like, I have this weird idea, right? That if we took better care of ourselves, if we had more energy, if we knew what made us thrive, if we held ourselves more responsible so we didn't have to be held accountable, like, we'd also sell better. The results would be better as well. So what would your live better advice be for people listening? And it might be in line with what we've been talking about, or it might be something completely different. But like, what would that parting live better advice be?
I think the live better is really get to know yourself. And that is much harder than it sounds. And you might need to get to know yourself through what other people tell you. Some of the best, my self-awareness has come from other people telling me something. And I'm like, oh yeah, good or not so great. So listen to others and get to know yourself. Because what I'm saying works for me may not work for you. And that is okay. But get to know where and how you thrive and find it.
I was hoping you'd come back to that word, because that was how you described it at the beginning. Like, this is how I thrived in understanding what does bring the best out of you, but being open to other people's opinions. I think that's phenomenal. Yeah. Like, I haven't heard it phrased that way before. I love it. Like, a lot of my self-awareness came from third-party feedback, which is true. Like, I've never thought about it that way, because if you're just sitting there, your viewpoint is different than how other people can see. We all have blind spots. We all have blind spots. So,
and on both ends, the good stuff and the bad stuff. Somebody gave me positive feedback and I was like, who are you talking about? And they're like, you do that. And I was like, really? Interesting.
All right. Yeah. Like, I'll do that a little bit more of that.
Everybody doesn't do
that. Yeah. Beth, this was amazing. Where can people get more from you? Where are you putting out contact? Where can they or content? Where can they find you? Like, where can they get more Beth Jacobs in their lives?
LinkedIn and Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah. Or where I am the most.
Well, we will include those in the show notes, everybody. Beth, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your insights. This is phenomenal. We'll probably have to do a part 2 for sure.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Hell yeah.
And this is like, I can talk about this for days. So.
Well, we'll keep it going, because I think a lot still needs to be covered here. So appreciate you, Beth. Thank you.
Thanks so much.